Resurrecting the Ram Mandir, a cathartic moment for Hindus after centuries of iconoclastic fury. Written by Rakesh Krishnan Simha. When the iconic Lakshmi Narayan Temple, also known as Birla Mandir, opened in 1936, it was the first temple built in Delhi in several centuries. So many prominent temples had been destroyed by Muslim invaders and rulers that Hindus stopped building their places of worship in Delhi. The accumulated fear of a millennium of destruction had prevented Hindus from even thinking of building a temple. In fact, Delhi's St. James Church, the largest Christian church built by the British in India, is 100 years older than Birla Mandir. Author Rajat Mitra points out that when the temple came up, the architects who built it cried with joy, realizing what a historical moment it was for the people of Delhi. The Pran Pratishtha of the Ram Temple at Ayodhya is a moment of catharsis for Hindus. It is the first historic temple freed from the servitude of Islam. During the excavation for the new temple's foundations, several artifacts, such as stone pillars, a 5-foot lingam, and broken statues of gods and goddesses, were unearthed at the site. The discoveries not only bolster the claim of archaeologists and Hindus that the Mughal invader Babur had indeed destroyed the original temple of Lord Ram, it is yet another blow to the pseudo-secular scholars and fake historians such as Irfan Habib and Ramullah Thapar who had the audacity to claim there was no such temple. The finds at Ayodhya are a pointer to the over 1,000-year iconoclastic fury of the Muslim invaders. If one begins to calculate the total number of Hindu, plus Jain, Buddhist, and Sikh temples destroyed by Muslims in India, the final figure would be staggering, and it would still be an estimate and, in all likelihood, a low one. This is because not all invaders and rulers systematically recorded every instance of temple destruction. In the 2-volume Hindu Temples, What Happened to Them, Sita Ram Goel, Arun Shourie, Harsh Narain, J. Debashi, and Ram Swarup mention that Mahmud of Ghazni robbed and burnt down 1,000 temples at Mathura, and 10,000 in and around Kannauj. One of his successors, Ibrahim, demolished 1,000 temples each in the Ganga Yamuna Doab and Malwa. Muhammad Ghori destroyed another 1,000 at Varanasi. Qutbuddin Aibak employed elephants for pulling down 1,000 temples in Delhi. Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur destroyed 200 to 300 temples in Karnataka. A Sufi, K.M. Shah, destroyed 12 temples at Tiruchirappalli. Adding up the temples destroyed by just 6 Muslim rulers gives you the stupendous figure of 15,212. Such exact or approximate counts, however, are available only in a few cases. Goel and his co-writers created what is the most exhaustive work on temple destruction and desecration in India and its near abroad. They cited from 80 histories spanning more than 1,200 years, starting with the Baghdad historian al-Baladuri, who wrote in Arabic in the second half of the 9th century, and coming down to Syed Mahmudul Hasan, who wrote in English in the 1940s. Our citations mention 61 kings, 63 military commanders, and 14 Sufis who destroyed Hindu temples in 154 localities, big and small, spread from Khorasan in the west to Tripura in the east, and from Transoxiana in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, over 1,100 years. In most cases, the destruction of temples was followed by the erection of mosques, madrasas, and khanqahs, etc., on the temple sites and, frequently, with temple materials. But why were temples targeted? While the Muslim invaders and rulers knew, or cared, little about India's history, its ancient civilization, and profound philosophy, they certainly knew their religious duty towards the country's infidels and idol worshippers. Says historian Kishori Saran Lal, instruction and inspiration about this duty came to them from 3 sources, the Quran, the Hadiths, and the personal exploits of the Prophet. Every Muslim, whether educated or illiterate, knew something about the Quran and the Hadiths. The learned or the ulama amongst them usually learnt the Quran by heart and informed their conquerors and kings about its teachings and injunctions. The Prophet's deeds, even the most trivial ones, too were constantly narrated with reverence. The one supreme duty the Quran taught them was to fight the infidels with all their strength, convert them to Islam, and spread the faith by destroying their idols and shrines. There are many mosques all over India that are known to local tradition and the Archaeological Survey of India as built on the site of and, quite frequently, from the materials of demolished Hindu temples. Most carry inscriptions invoking Allah and Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, quoting the Quran and giving details of when, how, and by whom they were constructed. The following list is merely a fragment of the vast material left behind by Muslim chroniclers in India. Some articles have already talked about the destruction of Hindu temples by Muslims, like the series titled Islamic Destruction of Hindu Temples, in their own words. But this article gives more information that our previous articles didn't cover. Dibal, Sindh. In 712 CE, after having suffered 14 massive defeats at the hands of the Hindus of Sindh and Makran over the previous 68 years, the Arabs finally tasted victory. This was at Dibal in the Kingdom of Sindh. The coastal city of Dibal was named so because of its Deval, or Devalaya, meaning home of the gods. It contained a citadel temple with stone walls as high as 120 feet and a dome of equal height. It was a magnificent temple of huge proportions. After the Arabs captured the city, through the betrayal of the Buddhist leaders of the town, the invaders destroyed the temple as well as Buddhist temples in Sindh. Vasudeva Temple, Mathura. When Mahmud of Ghazni attacked Mathura in 1018, he saw a building of exquisite structure, which the inhabitants said had been built not by men but by heavenly beings. The wall of the city was constructed of hard stone, and 2 gates opened upon the river flowing under the city, which were erected upon strong and lofty foundations to protect them against the floods of the river and rains. On both sides of the city, there were 1,000 castles, to which idol temples were attached, all strengthened from top to bottom by rivets of iron and all made of masonry work, and opposite to them were other buildings, supported on broad wooden pillars, to give them strength. In the middle of the city, there was a temple that was larger and firmer than the rest. It was the legendary temple of Vasudeva. Mahmud wrote, "If any should wish to construct a building equal to this, he would not be able to do it without expending 100,000 million, red dinars, and it would occupy 200 years, even though the most experienced and able workmen were employed." Among the statues of gods, 5 were made of gold, each 15 feet tall, fixed in the air without support. The eyes of one of these statues were adorned with 2 rubies worth 50,000 dinars. On another, there was a sapphire purer than water and more sparkling than crystal. The weight was 450 miskals, 1 miskal equals 4.5 grams. The 2 feet of another idol weighed 4,400 miskals, and the entire quantity of gold yielded by the bodies of these idols was 98,300 miskals, 442 kilograms, of pure gold. There were also 200 silver idols, but they could not be weighed without breaking them into pieces and putting them into scales. After grudgingly admiring the unparalleled beauty of the temple, which barbarian raiders like him could never hope to build, and burning with envy at the advanced civilization of the Hindus, Mahmud gave orders that the temple should be burnt with naphtha and fire and leveled to the ground. The work of an estimated 2 centuries was reduced to smoke and ashes in a matter of hours. Somnath, Gujarat. The Shiva temple at Somnath was destroyed or desecrated 6 times. In 1024, Mahmud of Ghazni raided Gujarat, plundered the temple, and broke its Jyotirlinga. He took away a booty of 20 million dinars. In 1299, Delhi's Sultan Alauddin Khilji's governor, Ulu Khan, razed the temple a second time. The subsequent destruction happened in 1395 under Zafar Khan, the last governor of Gujarat under the Delhi Sultanate and later founder of the Gujarat Sultanate. Mahmud Begada, the Sultan of Gujarat, destroyed it in 1451. The Portuguese attacked Somnath in 1546. The 6th and final destruction was by Aurangzeb in 1665. Amir Khusro, the Sufi scholar and historian during the reign of Alauddin Khilji, witnessed the second destruction. According to him, the statue of Somnath, Shiva, was taken to Delhi, where it was thrown to be trampled under the feet of Muslims. They made the temple prostrate itself towards the Kaaba. You may say that the temple first offered its prayers and then had a bath, i.e., the temple was made to topple and fall into the sea. He, Ulu Khan, destroyed all the idols and temples but sent one idol, the biggest of all, to the court of his godlike majesty, Mahmud Ghazni. On that account, in that ancient stronghold of idolatry, the summons to prayers was proclaimed so loudly that they heard it in Misr, Egypt, and Madain, Iraq. Nataraja Temple, Brahmaspuri, Chidambaram, Tamil Nadu. Khusro shows his perverted and depraved nature while describing the scene of destruction at the temple of Lord Shiva. Here he, Malik Kafur, heard that in Brahmaspuri there was a golden idol. He then determined on razing the temple to the ground. It was the holy place of the Hindus, which the Malik dug up from its foundations with the greatest care, and the heads of Brahmins and idolaters danced from their necks and fell to the ground at their feet, and blood flowed in torrents. The stone idol called Ling Mahadev, which had been a long time established at that place and on which the women of the infidels rubbed their s for sexual satisfaction, these up to this time the kick of the horse of Islam had not attempted to break. The Musulmans destroyed all the lings, and Deo Narain fell down, and the other gods who had fixed their seats there raised their feet and jumped so high that at one leap, they reached the fort of Lanka, and in that affright, the lings themselves would have fled had they any legs to stand on. Qut al-Islam Masjid, Qutb Minar, Delhi. This fort of the Hindus was conquered, and the Jami Masjid built in the year 1192 by Emir Qutbuddin Aibak, the slave of Sultan Muhammad Ghori. The materials of 27 idol temples, on each of which 2 million delhuals, high denomination coin current at that time in Delhi, had been spent, were used in the construction of the mosque. Jami Masjid at Malan, Palanpur, Gujarat. The Jami Masjid was built by Khan-i-Azam Ulu Khan, who suppressed the wretched infidels. He eradicated the idolatrous houses and mine of infidelity, along with the idols with the edge of the sword, and made ready this edifice. He made its walls and doors out of the idols, the back of every stone became the place for prostration of the believers. The date of construction of the mosque is mentioned as 1462 in the reign of Mahmud Begada of Gujarat. Gakanala Masjid, Kurnool district, Andhra Pradesh. During the rule of Muhammad Shah, there was a well-established temple in Kummam. Muhammad Salih, who prospers in the rectitude of the affairs of faith, was razed to the ground, the edifice of the idol house, and broke the idols in a manly fashion. He constructed on its site a suitable mosque, towering above the buildings of all. The date of construction is mentioned as 1729 to 30 CE in the reign of the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. Krishna Janmabhoomi Temple, Mathura. The temple of Keshav Rai at the site of Lord Krishna's birth in Mathura was built at a cost of 33 rupees lakh, 3.3 million, by Rao Bir Singh Bundela in the reign of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, 1605-27. It had excited the envy of many Muslims before Aurangzeb, who, however, had not Aurangzeb's opportunities and power. It had become a center of pilgrimage for the whole of India. In 1670, Aurangzeb leveled the temple to the ground, following which he issued a farman. In this month of Ramzan, the religious-minded emperor ordered the demolition of the temple at Mathura known as the Dehra of Keshav Rai. His officers accomplished it in a short time. A grand mosque was built on its site at a vast expenditure. Praised be the God of the great faith of Islam that in the auspicious reign of this destroyer of infidelity and turbulence, such a marvelous and impossible feat was accomplished. On seeing this instance of their strength of the emperor's faith and the grandeur of his devotion to God, the Rajas felt suffocated, and they stood in amazement like statues facing the walls. The idols, large and small, set with costly jewels, which had been set up in the temple, were brought to Agra and buried under the steps of the Mosque of Jahanara, to be trodden upon continually. Gyanvapi Mosque, Varanasi. It was constructed by Aurangzeb after destroying the ancient Kashi Vishwanath temple. In Hindustan Ki Masjidain, Maulana Abdul Hai writes with an air of quiet triumphalism, it is said that the Mosque of Benares was built by Alamgir on the site of the Bisheshwar temple. That temple was very tall and held as holy among the Hindus. On this very site and with those very stones, he constructed a lofty mosque, and its ancient stones were rearranged after being embedded in the walls of the mosque. It is one of the renowned mosques of Hindustan. The second mosque at Benares is the one which was built by Aurangzeb on the bank of the Ganga with chiseled stones. This also is a renowned mosque of Hindustan. It has 28 towers, each of which is 238 feet tall. This is on the bank of the Ganga, and its foundations extend to the depth of the waters. Adina Masjid, Panjua, Bengal. For hundreds of years, the remains of a massive Shiva temple in Bengal lie smothered by a mosque. The Muslims who built their place of worship over the temple were in such a hurry, careless, or simply brazen that they didn't completely erase the Hindu carvings of Lord Ganesha, elephants, a rhinoceros, a cow and calf, human figures, a goose, a man and woman, and a crocodile. In 1888, Joseph Davidich Milik Biglarov, a civil engineer of ASI in Bengal, surveyed the Adina Mosque. He had this to say in his official report, Archaeological Survey of Bengal, Part 2, the west wall of the masjid, it will be seen, barely leaves room for these. A further circumstance which may and possibly did determine the position of the west wall of the masjid is that, in all probability, the sanctum of the temple, judging from the remnants of heavy pedestals of statues, now built into the pulpit and the superb canopied trefoils, now doing duty as prayer niches, stood where the main prayer niche now stands. Nothing would probably so tickle the fancy of a bigot as the power of placing the sanctum of his orthodox cult, in this case the main prayer niche, on the spot where the hated infidel had his sanctum, and utilizing to the honor of his own religion, the very canopies of the idolatrous statues, for there is no doubt whatever, in my mind, comparing these trefoils with the recently discovered similar trefoils at Kailas over figures of Parvati, see report part 1 of last year, that these trefoils are really the canopies over the statues originally enshrined here. Taste for barbarism. The inventive minds of the Islamic rulers came up with new and macabre ways to insult the Hindus. Goel observes other methods of telling the truth about the idols had been devised by the more imaginative among the swordsmen of Islam. Firoz Shah Tughlaq had the idol at Puri perforated and dragged along the road to Delhi. The pieces of the idol at Kangra were given to the butchers for use as weights while selling meat. The copper umbrella of the same idol he got recast into pots for heating water with which the faithful washed their hands, feet and faces before saying their prayers. Mahmud Khilji of Malwa had the idol at Kumhalgad reduced to lime, which was put in pan, betel leaves, and the Hindus were forced to eat their god. Amir Khusro describes with glee how Firoz Shah Tughlaq got bags full of cow's flesh tied around the necks of Brahmins and had them paraded through his army camp at Kangra. Mahmud Shah Tubamani bestowed on himself the honor of being a Ghazi simply because he had killed in cold blood the helpless Brahmin priests of the local temple after Hindu warriors had died fighting in defense of the fort at Kondapoli, Andhra Pradesh. Ayodhya, Prelude to Recovery. The movement for the restoration of the Ram Janmabhoomi temple at Ayodhya brought to the fore a suppressed chapter of India's history, namely, the large-scale destruction of Hindu temples by foreign invaders. According to Goel, this chapter, though significant, was only a part of the Muslim behavior pattern as recorded by Muslim historians of medieval India. The other parts were mass slaughter of people not only during the war but also after the armies of Islam had emerged victorious. Capture of large numbers of non-combatant men, women, and children as booty and their sale as slaves all over the Islamic world. Forced conversion to Islam of people who were in no position to resist. Reduction to the status of dhimmis or non-citizens of all those who could not be converted and imposition of inhuman disabilities on them. Emasculation of the dhimmis, second-class citizens, by preventing them from possessing arms. Impoverishment of the dhimmis through heavy discriminatory taxes and misappropriation of a major part of what the peasants produced. Ruination of the native and national culture of the dhimmis by suppressing and holding in contempt all its institutions and expressions. Clearly, Muslims in India have a lot to answer for. Despite having broken the country along religious lines and created Pakistan, which has the dubious distinction of being the first and only country created based on religion, the majority of these Muslims stayed back in India. Contrary to what they claim, the Muslims of India did not stay back because they loved India or were loyal to it, they did so with the cynical view to conquer it through long-term demographic jihad. Despite their betrayal of their homeland, their loyalty to Pakistan, and their propensity to cause riots at the slightest provocation, Muslims have been treated as equal citizens with full democratic rights. While Muslims have exhibited hostility towards Hindus and their customs, most Hindus choose to ignore such open displays of fanaticism. There needs to be a final closure on Hindu genocide and Muslim iconoclasm so that all Indians can move into an era of communal amity. For this to happen, Muslims must come forward and surrender the sites of the most important Hindu temples that were destroyed. Then, Muslim leaders must offer a collective apology to Hindus for the genocide of the past 1,200 years. If Germans can apologize to the Jews for the Holocaust, why can't Muslims apologize to Hindus? Or is the extreme reluctance to acknowledge the crimes of medieval Muslim rulers an indication they approve of the genocide and iconoclasm? Are the Muslims signaling that the Ram Janmabhoomi model is the only way for Hindus to reclaim their temples? If that's the case, the biggest loser will once again be the Muslim.